Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michelle Gorlow, and I represent Assembly District 35 in Clark County, and I'm here today to present on Assembly Bill 205, which is really appropriate because this is Children's Week, and we're here for the children. So schools are a hotbed for transmission of disease. Those of you with school-age children can imagine that feeling in the pit of your stomach if you're hearing stories from your child about roaches in their locker, ants in the cafeteria or the bathroom. It's kind of gross, a lot gross. Keeping pests at bay can cause a host of other problems. Unnecessary, improper, or ill-timed pesticides can also cause eye, nose, and throat irritation, and headaches or other adverse effects. Maintaining a bug-free school is no easy task. We know that kids' frequent hand-to-mouth contact and poor hand-washing habits can cause disease to spread in schools more rapidly than in other environments. But we also know that healthy school environments are essential to learning. Children who cannot attend school due to illness cannot reach their highest potential. There was a middle school with such a bad rodent problem that the health district had to be called in. And a few years ago, another middle school had to close its cafeteria altogether because the rodent problem had become so horrible. And last August, at a high school, rodent feces were discovered in the cafeteria by health inspectors. Yet another high school has an ongoing cockroach infestations that students are unwilling to even use their lockers. These are common stories that we're hearing nationwide. And rodents are a disease vector, and roach feces are a trigger for asthma. I do not need to explain these conditions are unsanitary, unacceptable, and again, they're really gross. Assembly Bill 205 mandates the implementation of integrated pest management practices in Nevada schools. According to the United States Environment Protection Agency, integrated pest management encourages long-term, sustainable approaches to successful pest management. It addresses not only the safety concerns of pesticide use, but also focuses on solution-based approaches that solve the reason why pests are in school. So let me walk you through the measure section by section. Section 2 defines integrated pest management as a strategy for controlling pests and weeds with minimal use of pesticides or herbicides. Section 3 requires each school district board of trustees to establish and maintain an integrated pest management policy. It prescribes the contents of such a policy, which must include a procedure for monitoring the school to determine when pests or weeds are present and when corrective action is needed. It must also include written guidelines for determining when specific measures should be taken to control pests and weeds. Section 4 requires the superintendent of each school district to appoint a chief integrated pest management coordinator to carry out this policy. It also authorizes the superintendent to appoint subordinate coordinators to assist this chief. And finally, Section 5 requires each school district board of trustees to ensure at least 10% of the district's employees who provide custodial or maintenance services are certified in integrated pest management by a nonprofit organization that meets certain qualifications. And at this point, I would like to have Dr. Nair, conclude with her presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to be here today and to talk about my favorite topic, which is School Ipm. So I'm an entomologist by training, very passionate about insects, as you can see, I'm wearing one. And I coordinate the Arizona School Ipm program. And thank you. So
please state your name for the record.
Oh, Shaku Nair. Shaku Nair. Thank you. So I want to start with the question, why School Ipm and what is Ipm? So Michelle already mentioned Ipm is integrated pest management or intelligent pest management. It is a holistic approach to pest management, and it takes into account, it's integrated, so it takes into account a number of different pest management tactics which are most suitable to that particular situation. Plus it's sustainable, it's environmentally friendly, and it's really the best way to manage pests, especially in schools. So why should we care about School Ipm? I get asked this question a lot, and the answer is children. Our future citizens, and who we all are very, very concerned about, right? And children spend a lot of their time in school, as do many adults, teachers and others. And children are not little adults, as we all know. Their bodies are developing. Their physiologies are developing. They're not able to detoxify harmful chemicals as well as we do. and so they are more vulnerable to pests and pesticides. And it's scientifically proven that a healthy and pest-free environment contributes greatly to not only to human health, but also to scholastic achievement. And it's also a fact that many schools around the country face problems due to pests and pest management that affect their day-to-day functioning. And some of the issues faced due to pests in schools are these routine pesticide applications that are conducted no matter, regardless of the presence of pests or not. And this results in a lot of wasted resources, unnecessary exposure to those pesticides, and above all, ineffective pest management. And a lot of school personnel are aware of IPM and the benefits of it, but they're not able to practice it because they lack proper training and they lack the proper resources. So, and training, proper training can definitely rectify that. So here's, I just wanted to share a few examples of how IPM works. So I mentioned that it includes a lot of different tactics, not just one. So door sweeps, for example. We're all aware of what door sweeps are, right? So thin strips of material that we put under doors. Maybe there are horizontal ones and vertical ones. And door sweeps stop a lot of crawling pests from getting in. Crawling pests like crickets, cockroaches, scorpions. Did anyone see the scorpion crawling in under that door there? You see that? See? So when there was if there was a door sweep under that door, it would have stopped that scorpion. It would have avoided a lot of panic, right? And maybe pesticide use and stings, the most serious thing. So that's one example. Another example is cleaning floor drains. Anyone who's been inside a school kitchen knows that there's floor drains inside kitchens and cafeterias. And many times these are located under heavy equipment, like ovens or dishwashers, sinks, and they're hard to reach. And over time, floor drains accumulate a lot of organic matter, like the one you see in the picture. It's gross. And that organic matter can be a breeding ground for a lot of pests, flies, rodents, cockroaches, all of those. So floor drains, and they serve like a permanent food source for them. So cleaning floor drains stops all of those pests. And you don't have to use pesticides. So that is how IPM works. So we do little things to change the habitat and make it less favorable for pests. That's what we do. And IPM is definitely not an additional thing to do on the lists of custodial staff or maintenance staff, teachers, or anyone else in the school. It's part of their daily job. And we always ask them to just do your job, just think pests. For example, taking out the trash at the end of the day means no food for pests, right? Repairing a leaky faucet, like the one you see in the picture, means no water for pests. We're not leaving out any water for pests. And decluttering. Decluttering means no shelter, no place for pests to hide. So it's all in IPM it blends very well into the daily tasks of all school personnel. And regarding training, so there's a lot of these little things that school staff can learn about IPM, and they can very effectively implement in during their daily jobs. And there's training available for that from different sources. And one of them, I just wanted to mention one of them, which is the Pest Defense for Healthy Schools. It's an online training system. It's free and flexible, and it was developed by an entire group of national School Ipm partners. I was one of the partners who developed that training. All of the training modules are available online. And it's an excellent system. It's updated periodically so that it stays updated on all of the new trends. And it has examples from real life that people can relate to. And the people who take the training can actually earn a certificate at the end of the training. So it's a great option for training. So it's available out there. So school folks don't have to worry, where will I get that training? So So this is how it looks, the site. It's very simple to operate, very user-friendly. All they have to do is to get an account, create an account, that's all. And we also do periodical surveys of people who take that training, and everyone has indicated that it's very, very useful, and they can apply it in their daily lives. It's useful, and the ability to understand about pest infestations, about how to manage them, how it can be incorporated into their work. So it's very, very encouraging. The feedback is very encouraging. And just to list some of the benefits of IPM to conclude, it's proactive, and we all know that prevention is better than cure, right? And it results in a lot of benefits, better indoor air quality, reduction in asthma, reduction in absence, student absence, and improvement in performance, work performance, and scholastic achievement. And we have a lot of scientific studies that have been done to prove the benefits of IPM. I just listed out a few over here. Like it prevents future pest infestations, it's sustainable, it cuts unnecessary costs, and overall a reduction in pest control costs. That's it. And that is my contact information. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. First of all, let me thank Assemblymember Gorlow for carrying this piece of legislation and shepherding it to this point. Let me also thank Dr. Nair for coming to Nevada from Arizona today to share her expertise on integrated pest management. I just wanted to bring the committee's attention to a draft amendment that NSEA has offered for the committee's consideration based on some of the varied fiscal notes that districts put into the file on this legislation. So the intent of the legislation, as Dr. Nair said, was not really to create additional work, although there are additional responsibilities for school districts outlined in the legislation. The idea of the legislation is to better coordinate work that we believe is already going on in districts. So in Section 4, we are recommending the addition of language to clarify that the personnel appointed to these integrated pest management coordination positions may come from existing staff within those districts. And then we also wanted to clarify that the training that we're asking districts to ensure that at least 10% of custodial and maintenance employees of school districts receive this training, that training is to be provided at no additional cost to the district, as Dr. Nair pointed out, that these trainings are available free and online, and I do believe that they also could be available in person at districts' requests. Mr. Chair, I believe we are available for questions.
Okay, thank you so much. And I just want to be sure from the bill sponsor, which I'm assuming since he's sitting there with you, it is a friendly amendment. You're good with the amendment. Okay, great. All right. So at this time, we'll have questions from our committee. I know we have Assemblywoman Krasner.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. Thank you for your presentation. My question specifically relates to Section 5 of the bill. The Board of Trustees of each school district shall ensure that at least 10% of the employees of the school district who provide custodial or maintenance services are certified in integrated pest management by a nonprofit organization that meets the requirements of subsection 2. So you're imposing more or additional duties on the custodians and the maintenance persons. Are you intending to also give them more money or additional money since you're imposing additional duties on those people? I'm told that it's difficult to even find people to fill those positions now. Thank you.
So through the chair to Assemblymember Krasner, Chris Daly from the Nevada State Education Association. So 2 points in response to your question, which is a good question. First of all, the bill does call for 10% of staff to access and complete the trainings that we discussed in the presentation. And so that training would be, I guess, an additional requirement for certain staff people. But the idea is that training and that basically that professional development that is provided hopefully will be included in, the existing work requirements of those employees. And with that professional development, the idea is that their job in terms of dealing with infestations becomes an easier job, right? That the training helps those staff members in the completion of their jobs. And I would say in terms of, the remuneration, it's an issue that our organization deals with frequently through the collective bargaining process. And so, this legislation doesn't call for increases, but potentially this could be a subject of collective bargaining for education support professional units and districts.
Follow-up, please. I appreciate that you're saying it's only 10% of the custodians or maintenance staff. However, because you are imposing additional duties on the custodians and maintenance staff, it seems that you should also give them additional pay. Thank you.
Thank you. And then
This is Shaku Nair, the entomologist. I just wanted to add that it's not an imposing of, I don't think it's an imposing of additional duties. It's for their betterment. And because if they are not trained properly, they cannot do their job and they might even lose it. So that's what I wanted to add. So I wouldn't consider it as a burden. It's definitely not a burden on them. Just wanted to add that.
Quick question, just piggybacking off of that. I know that it said 10% of the school district. Being that it's such an issue, as you've pointed out in your PowerPoint, should that be not per school because you probably only have one or two. Why not at the school level versus the school district level? Because you could literally have all of the staff one side of town that has this certification. How does it help the whole?
Mr. Chairman, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. So Section 5 and the requirement for training of custodial and maintenance staff is part of a bigger bill. So in terms of answering your question, I would point to Section 3, which requires the districts to have a plan for implementing integrated pest management, and hopefully, part of that plan will be making sure that the resources are available, dispersed around the school district to make sure that those issues are covered. With that said, I think, we wanted to make sure that there was a realistic number of people who could go get that training. Perhaps in future sessions, if this is successful, we can revisit that number. Perhaps per Assemblymember Krasner's question, it becomes a subject of collective bargaining in districts. So I'm not exactly sure where school-based IPM will go in Nevada, but I think that hopefully through the overall model of the legislation, that districts are able to make sure that there's application across their districts.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleague. I echo the sentiments about making sure that we're rewarding and taking care of our custodians and maintenance staff at our schools. My question is for under Section 3, number 1, 2, and 3. And I do understand the idea of this more organic, preventative way of handling, reducing pests and everything. But I'm also considering the different geographical areas that our schools are in throughout Nevada, and also the size of some of our schools. We have school buildings in Clark County where there's 3,000 to 4,000 people in that building on any given day. A staff of 300, 32 to 3,600 students, and in some respects that's larger than many of our towns here in Nevada. So I just want to make sure that we're not restricting, while the bill says we can, after the preventative measures, make sure that we use a non-chemical pest or weed. I just want to make sure we're not restricting that, because again, the effectiveness sometimes in a building with 4,000 people that are eating and using the restrooms and all the things that happen, and showering in some cases, all the things that happen in a school in a given day. I just want to make sure that this bill won't restrict that the schools or the districts will have the ability, based on whatever plan they devise, to still incorporate that if they feel necessary.
Ma'am, yes, definitely. So this is Shaku Nair, entomologist and IPM specialist. I just wanted to add that excellent question. And IPM is definitely not anti-pesticides. We will definitely use pesticides, only we will use them wisely when they are needed. And we'll use safer options, because there's different kinds of pesticides, as we know. And we'll use the least hazardous ones. It's definitely not anti-pesticides.
Follow-up, Chair? So then, based on that, will you be able to provide recommendations of some pesticides that are safer?
Yeah.
Or more organic-based? So you will recommend those?
Yes, absolutely. So when an IPM policy is developed, there'll be a list of pesticides that are approved for use, specifically in sensitive environments like schools.
Okay, thank you.
So the training will impart that knowledge to all who are taking the training. So that's why it's so beneficial.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, we'll go to Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for bringing this bill. I actually really love this bill. It's amazing once you have a little bit of background in seeing pest management, where you start to see it in your daily life. My question for you has kind of piggybacks on what Assemblywoman Miller was talking about, how we define pesticides and herbicides, because I do see that there's kind of a breakout of let's see, we call it non-chemical pest or weed management before pesticides and herbicides. But also ensuring that we have MSDS sheets on site for any pesticide that's brought on site, and ensuring that that is part of the training as well, especially as we move into maybe alternatives from what is the norm for our facilities. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about storage as well, and just ensuring that the training has a storage component, so we understand like how to appropriately store and maybe develop general SOPs, which I think this is a component of this would be an SOP for the management of and application of at each site. If you just go into a little bit more around the intent of those couple of things.
So, Assemblywoman Peters, excellent question again. And this is Shaku Nair, entomologist and IPM specialist. I will definitely address both of those concerns that you raised. So, as part of the training that is given to IPM personnel, depending on the type of personnel, again. So, if it's we have under the training modules that I mentioned, the pest defense for healthy schools. We have different modules for different categories of staff. And in the custodial and maintenance training modules, these aspects are specifically covered. What kinds of pesticides can be used, and what records need to be maintained about each one of them, and what to do in the event of an incident, and all of the different kinds of safer, non-chemical and chemical means that can be used. All of that is covered in the trainings. And storage is also a very important point, especially if, when pesticides are stored on in a sensitive site like a school. So there's specific directions, instructions on that as well, how they should be stored as in fireproof and child-proof cabinets, and they should be stored under lock and key. And there should be one person who's responsible for them, and updating, like getting older or expired chemicals disposed, maintaining a list, all of that is covered.
Thank you. With regard to the record keeping, so I'm imagining that the records would start at the school, and then they'd be sent up to the chief, the person in each school district who's supposed to manage this, and then what does auditing look like, right? To make sure that what is being recorded and what's happening at the schools is consistent. I don't know if maybe that already happens, but if there's a process for that, or if maybe we need to include a process for auditing to ensure that what's being reported is actually what's happening on the school ground.
Yes.
Just in terms of the legislation currently, I don't believe that there is an audit provision required within the plan. I think we would be looking at the sponsor open to including that in your work session. There is the system outlined for maintaining the records, and then there's also a notification requirement for when the bigger chemicals are used. So it does seem like there is potentially the pieces there that could lead to your suggestion of reviewing those and auditing them.
To give an example, we see in some industries that some of the more mainstream chemical pesticides are cheaper than some of the alternatives, and so people will report that they're using alternatives, but then divert to using the cheaper version, and then pocket that a bit. So that's that's one of the things that has been seen in the industry for around the use of pesticides. So that's why I'm just if we have something that helps us ensure that it's being utilized.
So, again, Assemblywoman Peters, this is Shaku Nair, entomologist and IPM specialist. So I'm glad you brought up that point, because in the training modules, there's one module for administrators and facility managers. So in that training module, specifically, there's a link to a plan, an school IPM plan. And in that, we provide instructions on how this reporting can be done at different levels, and how to form a committee who oversee this, all of the purchase and the use and storage, all of that about these pesticides. So when it's done at different levels, there is more accountability on what is used. And once a school district decides to adopt this training and put it into use, I'm sure it'll be a easy process. It will take time to get established, of course, but it's possible. Thank you.
All right, Assemblywoman Tolles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for making my skin crawl. I don't think I've ever seen a cockroach in my area, and specifically in northern Nevada. So I had to look it up to see if we do indeed have them. So thank you for that. And I appreciate your work. In high school, I actually entertained the idea of becoming an entomologist, believe it or not. So thank you for coming here today and presenting with your expertise. But I do wonder if we have any more Nevada-specific stats. Part of what we have to do in this committee and in this body is constantly weigh out costs and benefits. And And so I think maybe getting a better idea specifically of where incidents have really arisen that this has created, significant health issues and so forth, so that we can weigh out as we're talking about, just where we put our focus. I saw, for example, a lot of your examples had to do with really what I would say capital improvements, the structures of the building. And I know that that's a conversation we have often in our state is, fundings for doors, locks, security systems, buildings, expansions, and so forth. And so just want to get a better idea to help us with that cost benefit analysis. I saw that there was only one fiscal note that was provided by White Pine. So I would very much like to hear from the other, and I know we're a policy committee, but it does help us in that weighing of cost benefits, how that plays a role. And last thing, I do love the training across the board for sure. I think that anyone can benefit from that. I'd like to take it. So, all right, thanks.
Just through the chair to Assemblymember Tolles, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. So there were actually a number of fiscal notes placed on the bill from various districts. White Pine was the only one that was not in the larger packet of fiscal notes. They seem to be mostly around the cost of hiring a new personnel to be the integrated pest management coordinator or deputy. There were fiscal notes around estimating the cost of training. In the amendment, hopefully we're clarifying that there are not necessarily new costs that districts would not be required to hire new personnel for this position, and that districts would not be required to spend extra for the training. If the districts, to Assemblymember Krasner's comments about custodial pay, the union's not going to argue against that, but that would be a subject of collective bargaining agreement. In terms of the capital costs, I think Dr. Nair might have some data on money that is saved or estimates of money that can be saved per school district by doing the prevention as opposed to dealing with issues that Assemblymember Gorlow outlined in her opening presentation. And then in asking for the Nevada specific examples, I don't know that that's out there. I know, the Department of Agriculture does do some of this work. We can follow up with them to see if there's better Nevada-based data on this.
Assemblywoman Hardy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill, and thank you, Dr. Nair, for traveling up here to Carson City to share your knowledge with us. Do you have any information you could share possibly about other states that have IPM policies in place and how those were received and implemented and the advantages to those?
Assemblywoman Hardy, this is Shaku Nair, entomologist. So a lot of our states have IPM laws that require IPM to be implemented in school districts. And Arizona is not one of them, unfortunately, but we have laws that require notification and certification of applicators. Only certified people can apply pesticides. That we have that. And about successes, right? How effective they are in seeing that IPM is implemented in the schools, right? Wasn't that your question? So having a law definitely helps. That helps the school districts to implement those laws because there is that factor that we have to do this. They're kind of bound to do it. Whereas if there is no law, then they don't have to. Although it is encouraged, they don't have to. So it definitely makes a difference. Yeah. Is that your question?
Thank you for that. If you have any information of specific states, more specific information of how they implemented it, or, this is for anyone that would have information about that, that maybe Nevada models after, or, just so we get an idea of states that have done this, for information. Thank you.
Again, I'm Assemblywoman Hardy. This is Shaku Nair, entomologist. One example I would like to cite is Texas. So the Texas was one of the first states to have an school IPM law. And they have brought that up to such an excellent level. They have, all of their school districts are required to have an IPM coordinator at the district level who oversees the IPM training for all of the staff. And they offer, Texas A&M offers AgriLife Extension is the cooperative extension system of the, the land-grant university there that offers trainings on a regular basis to school IPM personnel. And as a result, as an example, I can say pre-IPM, in the pre-IPM time, when there was no IPM implemented in a school, in a medium-sized school with around, say, 10 schools, the yearly cost for pest management would be around $50,000. That would be brought down to about 12 or 14. That's the kind of difference that they have experienced in pest control costs. And they also report about 65% reduction in pest incidents by adding door sweeps under the doors. So there are a lot of figures like that. That's just an example, and I can certainly provide more if you want. Okay. Yes.
Okay, I have a question that I'm going to go in the weeds a little bit more, and I guess it's sort of a pun, sort of. So we'll go to Section 5. When you're talking about that, it has to be a nonprofit organization that meets the requirements of subsection 2. Okay, so the example that you gave is that there's free online, and I see that the last word on E is remotely, so that's the online. So my question is, so this doesn't become a task, and people are really, we're trying to see some change in this. Does it lock you out, like if you don't get a certain percentage? Because I'm just envisioning people just, okay, I'll do, A's all the way, or I'll do, how do we, is there a way that it locks a person out, and if they don't get a certain threshold of, say, 70% or higher, and then they need to wait it out for about a week or something like that? And then also, when you went on further for the next slide, where it says about the effectiveness, on the point scale and everything, and that's on the front end, do you have something on the back end to where they need to come back and measure what they've done? I know that's adding a little bit more, but I think that's how you really see the effectiveness, because otherwise it appears like it's and I'm just saying, I think that staff says, well, this is another thing we got to do. I have to do it in order to keep my job. I have to score a certain percent in order to, show for the certificate to spit out on the computer. So share that with us a little bit more.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Shaku Nair, entomologist, and I'm very glad you brought up that question. It's a very, very important question for people who want to take the test. So, this pest defense for healthy school system does not lock out people. So that's the first answer. They can take the test repeatedly, and they need to get 60%. And the modules are so designed that there are practice tests in between. As they progress through a module, there's reviews. You can review the content that was covered. And they can, so that makes the chance of getting their pass percentage higher, the likelihood of that higher. And so from the feedback that we've received, everyone who's taken the tests did not find it difficult at all. So they're designed in such a way that it's what they do on a regular basis. So it's not like something new for them. It's like a refresher for them. So that's why they don't consider it as something additional that they'll have to sit down for a while, of course, to take the test. That is the only thing that they're required to do.
All right, thank you.
Did I answer your question?
I really want to, and if you can answer to the, if you're going to check 2-3 months later, and I mean, I guess, is there a component to, because you want to see that behavioral change, you want to see that workmanship change, like what have they applied in what they previously did?
So,
Yes, please.
again, so Mr. Chairman, this is Shaku Nair, entomologist again. So yes, we do monitor that. So we do send out surveys regularly for people who have taken those tests, and we ask them, what changes did you make? Were you able to apply what you learned? And how did it benefit you? How did it benefit your job? And some of those statistics are actually about that. Yeah. In the presentation that I showed, they are about
Okay,
that.
yeah,
And
I'm looking at it right here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? All right, we'll let you, I'm sorry. Assemblywoman Krasner.
Hi, thank you. Just one more question. I am looking at section 5, sub 2. It talks about the certification in the integrated pest management by the nationally or internationally recognized company that has at least 15 years of experience providing education and training to school employees concerning management of pests. And then it says that the majority of the officers and board of directors have advanced degrees. And I'm just wondering if that's common, that the majority of officers and directors of a pest company have master's degrees or higher. Thank you.
Madam Krasna, yeah, this is Shaku Nair, entomologist. And most of the people, like you mentioned, they do have higher degrees in entomology or related field. So yeah, and they're able to. So wasn't that your question?
Through the chair to Assemblymember Krasner, to be honest, the organization that I know of, Dr. Nair's organization, that does fit this description. I don't know if there's another organization. I do know that most of the national players in integrated pest management have been a part of this project for a number of years. So, basically there is a best practice in pest management created by the experts in the field, and basically there's this training that has been developed that scientists like Dr. Nair and many others around the country have been working on for a number of years, and they are offering that to us at no charge.
And that was, for the record, that was?
I'm sorry, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association.
Thank you, all right.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, you're good.
I was good up until that last one.
Assemblywoman Hanson.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson. Thank you for being here. I've enjoyed what I've heard and learned a lot, but I'm curious what our existing management practices are. I was thinking that perhaps individual schools or facility managements for each of the school districts, I'm certain they have a policy of some sort, so maybe you could enlighten me a little bit about that.
Through the chair to Assemblymember Hanson, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. I do know that the Clark County School District does have an integrated pest management policy. I don't know of any other school districts in the state that do. I'm not saying they don't, but the big one does have a policy.
So, through the chair, Assemblywoman, now I got it right, okay. Assemblywoman Hanson, this is Shaku Nair, entomologist. I'd like to add that you asked what is the existing practice, right, in many school districts, not all, but many. So some school districts do have an IPM policy and they go by what is outlined in that policy, like they'll use only a certain kinds of chemicals and they won't do routine scheduled pesticide treatments. But many school districts around the country, not just here in Nevada, they contract pest management out, right? As many of us do in our homes and offices or other places, the pest management is contracted out, and there is usually no depending on the contract, there's usually no monitoring. The pest service provider comes in every month or every 2 weeks, and they will put down pesticides, whether there are pests or not. So that is the practice, and that is what we want to try to avoid by the use of IPM. Thank you.
All right. So at this time, we will ask for you, you can go and have a seat and relax for a minute. And we will have, I want to go over Assembly Standing Rule 54. We have 3 areas in which people can come forth. You can come forth in support, which means that you approve the measure as written, or with proposed amendments approved by the sponsor, in other words, a friendly amendment. Opposition is defined as not supporting the measure as written or opposing the bill as revised by an amendment not approved by the sponsor. And then you can come neutral, which means you're offering a particular insight on a measure, but you express no position. So at this time, if you are in support of Assembly Bill 205, please come forth. And we can fill up the seats. And again, when you're ready, please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Warren Hardy, today representing the Nevada Pest Management Association, here today in support of this legislation. Pest management is a lot more complicated, Mr. Chairman, than most people think. The more I learn about it, the more I get involved with the association, the more hesitant I am about the fact that I can buy pesticides at Home Depot and do whatever I want with them. It's a complex process. And as a matter of practice, Mr. Chairman, I think most of our schools do this in-house as a way to save money. So this kind of additional training is extremely important if they're going to actually do that procedure in-house. I spoke with the sponsor, Assemblywoman Gorlow, regarding the issue. The only time we really find that pest management professionals from our associations are those that are in this as companies get into schools, at least in Clark County, is when there's a problem, when there's an issue, when there's a beehive, when there's something that is a little bit beyond the ability of the in-house folks to deal with. And we just wanted to make sure there was nothing in this bill that prohibits the school district in those cases or the individual school in those cases from calling our members to come out and mitigate those needs. And there's nothing in this bill that does that. So I think the current practice as it exists today from our members' perspective can continue, and this improves the process because it's going to put additional training in the hands of folks who are doing this process with very dangerous chemicals and with very serious consequences. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Joseph Silvera. I'm a custodian with the Washoe County School District and a board member for the Washoe Education Support Personnel. The 2 reasons I agree with this is the first is it gives a standard operating procedure. It focuses on reducing chemical exposure. As one of the individuals who's called in to deal with any sort of pest at the when I'm on shift, procedures that can reduce the exposure rate for myself as well as any of my coworkers and any students nearby is something I'm greatly appreciative of. In addition, the fact that those SOPs would involve training for at least 10% is something that I'm very happy to see, as currently right now I don't know what sort of application or procedures I'm supposed to use with the current materials I have on hand. So I'm quite happy seeing that. And in addition to that, the second reason I approve it beyond just the training aspect of it is for things like storage and just things that might fall in between the cracks as far, as it currently stands, since we don't actually have proper SOPs for it. So I thank you.
And thanks for sharing your perspective, and I'm sure that you do a lot at the school. So I know you were just sharing with that. We know you're dedicated. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ruben Murillo, President of the Nevada State Education Association. And thank you for hearing this bill. And I appreciate also the recognition that our support professionals, especially custodians, need additional pay. So hopefully when you're looking down the road as to how to help public education, you'll remember the comments. What's keeping our custodians from, or people from applying for custodial positions are not necessarily the additional 10% that they may have to do in this bill. It's the overcrowded classrooms. It's the cleaning that they have to do with less people. So one of the budget cuts that happens, it's your custodial staff, it's librarians, it's people that the districts may not consider as important. Not that they don't consider them important, but important in terms of having to reduce personnel in what areas. And usually custodial services are one of the first ones. You ask a lot of our custodial members out there, and they're working by themselves, or at least they have 1 to 2 additional people working with them in terms of cleaning a school. So again, thank you very much for your consideration of this bill.
All right, anyone in Las Vegas in support? Can't see. All right, we will go to opposition. Anyone opposed to Assembly Bill 205, please come forward. Anyone neutral for Assembly Bill 205? All right, Assemblywoman Gorlow, if you'd like to do closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm a self-proclaimed spider hater. I've got a huge phobia of it, and this bill has given me heebie-jeebies from the start, especially since Mr. Daly threatened to have a spider demonstration. So, going, thank God, thank you, Mr. Daly. But no, seriously, I have anxiety just talking about these bugs, and I can't imagine going to school and having them in my locker, in my bathroom, in my cafeteria. And so I appreciate your consideration on this bill and just helping our custodians be properly trained so that we can manage these bugs and keep them out before they get to be a problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Gorlow. At this time, we will close out Assembly Bill AB 205, and we will open the hearing